Hello, this is Linda, and we're gonna study the N400 Application for Naturalization so you can become a U.S. citizen. We're only gonna do pages 1 through 10, which is your personal information. I'll be doing other videos later, from the rest from 11 to 16. But let's just break it into 3 parts, okay? So, before we start, I just want to let you know I am not a lawyer. I teach citizenship. I train people. I prep people to go to their interviews so they could understand their application, the 100 questions. I help them to read and to write and just, get ready to become an American citizen. Okay, let's go on page 1. This is your N400 application, okay? So on page 1, we're going to go all the way to part 2. Number 1, what is your current legal name? So you give them the name that's on your driver's license, okay? Number 2, what is the name that appears on your permanent resident card? So tell them your name that's on your permanent resident card. Number 3, have you used any other names? This is on page 2. So have you used any other names? So if you're married, did you have a different name when you were born? Give them the name when you were born. Do you have a nickname? Is your name John and people call you Jack, or they call you Johnny, or, just tell them all the names that people use, or, whatever, people know you by. Number 4, here you have the option. If you would like to change your name, they're going to ask you if you want to change your name. And if you do, just tell them what name you want to change it to. Number 5 is your social security number. They might ask you, what is your social security number? And you tell them. Or they will say, is your social security number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? You tell them yes or no. But if you're too nervous to talk, just take out your social security card when they ask you for your social security number and show it to them if you're that nervous. Let's go to number 7 now. What is your gender? Are you a male? Are you a man? Are you female? Are you a woman? Okay, number 8. What's your date of birth? And please give them the name of the month. Don't give them the number, give them the name of the month. Number 9. What is your lawful permanent resident? When did you become a lawful permanent resident? It's on your permanent resident card. Just look at it, study it, and tell them, I became a resident around the year 2000. Or I've been a resident since 1985. You don't have to be perfect, but tell them the year for sure. Number 10, what is the country of birth? What country were you born in? Number 11, what is your country of citizenship? Where are you a citizen of? What country are you a citizen of? And we're going to skip 12 and we're going to skip 13. They might ask you if you have a disability, and if you do, you tell them yes. If you don't, just say, no, I don't have a disability. And I'm going to have another video for people who do have disabilities. Okay? Part 4 on page 3. We're on page 3, so this is part 4. What is your daytime telephone number? What's a good number that they can reach you? Let's say they finished with the interview and they forgot to ask you a question. What number can they call you so you can come back right away? So give them that phone number. Okay? Let's go to part 5 Here go. What is your current physical address? Give them the number of the street, the name of the street, and tell them if it's street, way, boulevard. Give them your complete address. If you live in an apartment, tell them the apartment number. And they'll like to know how long you've lived there. Tell them I've lived there since 2005. Or I've been there since 1966. Just tell them how long you've lived there, since what date. And let's say that you live in a house. Let's say you live on 3333 Elizabeth Street. And they ask you, what's your apartment number? And you tell them, you know what? I don't live in an apartment. I live in a house. Okay? So they might try to ask you that to see. They're trying to test your English. Okay? And in the B part, what is your current mailing address? Where do you receive your mail? Maybe you have a P.O. box. Maybe, your mother-in-law or your sister or your father get your mail because maybe you're working out of town or something. Where do you receive your mail? But if you receive your mail at your house, they just go, same as my home address. I receive my mail at my home address. Okay? And part C, if you lived in other places, because you have to give them 5 years of where you've lived. So let's go to part 6 at the bottom on page 4. Were your parents married before your 18th birthday? This is if your parents were American citizens. Was your parents married? Your mother and father, were they married before your 18th birthday? Yes or no? Is your mother a U.S. citizen? Yes or no? And if she was, what is her name? What was the country she was born? What is her date of birth? What is the date she became a U.S. citizen? And then if your mother or father is a U.S. citizen, you have to take the certificate of naturalization to the interview. Same goes for your father. Is your father a U.S. citizen? If he is, yes. If he's not, no. And they'll ask the same thing. And again, take the citizenship certificate if they are American citizens. Okay, let's go to part 7 at the bottom, page 5. Your ethnicity. Are you Hispanic or Latino? Or are you not Hispanic or Latino? Okay, so number 2. What is your race? Let's say you're a Latino. What kind of Latino are you? Are you a white Latino? Are you an Asian Latino? Are you a black Latino? Just mostly everyone that I've worked with are mostly white or black Latinos. Okay, number 3. What is your height? So just go 5'4", 6'1", give them the feet, and then you give them the inches. How much do you weigh? What is your weight? That's number 4. How much do you weigh? Just tell them how much you weigh. It's usually on your driver's license. Number 5. What color are your eyes? Tell them what color it is. Number 6. What color is your hair? If you don't have any hair, say I'm bald. Or just give them color, your natural color. Okay? Now we're on page 6. Who is your employer? Or what school do you go to? So where do you work? You got to tell them where you work and what type of work do you do and how long you've been working there. If you go to school, you tell them what school you go to and how long you've been going to school. But if you're not working, you tell them, I'm unemployed because, I'm there's no work. Or if you're a housewife or a stay-at-home dad, tell them, I stay home and I take care of my children while my spouse goes to work. Or just say, I'm a housewife, or I'm a stay-at-home dad, or I'm retired. So they like to know 5 years of where you've worked. And now let's go to page 7. How many total days were you outside of the United States? When did you go to another country? How many days were you gone? This is already on your application. How many trips you took? And let's say that, it takes about 8 months to a year before you fill out the application, you turn it in, and by the time you get to your interview, you probably already went on a trip. When was your last trip outside of the United States? What was the day you went, the day you came back, and what country did you go to? And then sometimes they will ask you, okay, why did you go on this trip? And you can say, I went to go visit my parents, I went on vacation, I went for work. And then they ask you if your trip lasted more than 6 months. You just have to be very honest. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky because this is really your personal life. This is about your marital status. If you were single, they're going to ask you if you're single, if you're married, if you're divorced, if you're widowed, if you're separated, you have your marriage annulled. If you were single, you can skip this part. And if you're single without children, this part is over. Then we go to the other video. Okay? Okay, let's say that you're married. They're going to ask you, how many times have you been married? And you tell them, I've been married 1 time, I've been married 2 times, whatnot. It is your spouse. Your spouse is your husband. Your spouse is your wife. Is he in the United States military? Yes or no? You tell them. If they are, if they're not. Then they'll ask, what is their legal name? And what was their name before, you got married? Have they used any other name? Is your spouse, what is the date of birth? And what date did you get married? Then an F on page 8, they're going to ask about your spouse. Where does your spouse live? If your spouse, if your husband, if your wife lives with you, just say, he lives with me. She lives with me. And if they live in another address because they're working or they're going to school or any other reason, you give them the other address. But most of the time they live with you. And in G, where does your spouse work? If they're self-employed, just put he owns his own company, he's self-employed. He works at this, or he goes to school, or he's a stay-at-home dad. She stays home and takes care of the kids. Just say what your spouse does. Number 5, they ask you, is your spouse a U.S. citizen? Yes or no? If your husband and wife is a U.S. citizen, when did they become a U.S. citizen? Were they born in the United States or other? That means that they're taking the test that you're taking right now. So, if it's other, then if they were born in the United States, you gotta take a birth certificate to prove that they were born in the United States and they're U.S. citizens, right? So if it's other, then you have to complete what is the nationality of your spouse? If he's a U.S. citizen, say U.S. citizen. Is your spouse has a what do you call it, a permanent resident card. Say he's got a permanent resident card. What if your spouse doesn't have any documents? You put down undocumented, no documents, no paper. Answer with one of those. They're not going to penalize you. They just want to know. Okay? And B, if your spouse is a permanent resident, what is his number or her number? If I were you, if they have a card, take the card, make a copy of the card, and take it with you. And they will ask you, what is the immigration status? Is he a permanent resident? Yes or an other? Other is undocumented. Okay? And then how many times has your spouse been married? Just say 1, 2, 3 times, or just with me, 1 time. Okay, let's go back up. Okay, let's say you're divorced. So, and you're divorced right now. So you're going to skip the first part, your current spouse, and you're going to go all the way to, let's see, page 9. Page 9. And the question is number 9. If you were married before, what was your spouse's name? And when the marriage ended, what was his immigration status? Was he a U.S. citizen? Was he a resident? Or was he, from another country? Or, his citizenship was from France or Canada? Okay. And your ex-spouse, what was the date of birth? What country was your ex-spouse born at? What is their citizenship? What date did you get married? What date did the marriage end? And H is, how did it end? Did you have your marriage annulled? Did you get a divorce? Or did your spouse die? So that goes for all 3, which is right here. Single, you're done. Married, you have to talk about your spouse. Divorced, you got to talk about your ex-spouse. Widow is the same as divorce. You got to talk about them, their information. Separated, same thing. Marriage annulled, same thing. And you got to take the documentation. If you're married, take your marriage license. Divorce, take your divorce decrees. If you're widowed, take proof of death. Separated, take that paper. Marriage annulled, take the document saying that your marriage is annulled. And then the last part for this video, we're going to go to the children, which is on page 9. How many children do you have? If you have none, then we're done. If you have, let's say 2, 3, 5, 1, whatever, and it doesn't matter if they're adults or not. It doesn't matter if they're living with you or not. How many children did you take care of in your life, And even if they're dead, you got to put it down. I had 5 children. I have 5 children. And then you got to put their name. And if they're permanent residents, put the permanent resident number, the date of birth, the country of birth. Now we go to page 10. Where do they live? If they're young kids, they say they live with me. If your children live with you, even if they're like 10 years old or 30 years old, if they live with you, they say they live with me. Okay, but if they live across town or they live in another state, put it down. If they live in another country, put it down. Okay? And what is this child's relationship to you? Is it your biological child? Did you adopt him? How is he your child? And so there you go. You're going to do the same. If you have other children, you're going to give the same information. Okay? So, this is the first part of the N400 video. I hope this helped you, and look for the other part 2, which is have you ever been a terrorist and all that. That comes next. Okay? Well, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please email me.